Hi 8th graders, it's Miss Wright here. Not feeling the greatest, but I'm here to guide you through for notes for today. So here is what your note sheet looks like. This is actually going to be our note sheet for the next 3 times that we've taken notes. We've just put it all into one page for you. I cannot exactly remember off the top of my head what entry number this will be in your notebook, but it's that next number from yesterday. Today, our goal by the end is to use the Pythagorean theorem to try to find a missing side length. This is the most practical use of the Pythagorean theorem. When we get into some of our real world problems, you will really see these, the reality of some of these types of questions. So I'm going to zoom in here onto that left column where it says find missing hypotenuse. That's how we say that word, as you learned yesterday. Remember, that's the longest side of the triangle, the side that does not touch that right angle. It's across from it. Okay, so let's zoom in here and let's get started. So how do we find the missing hypotenuse? In order to find the missing hypotenuse, we're going to use the formula a squared plus b squared. And what does it equal? Recall your 2.0 skill. It equals c squared. And we're going to use that formula knowing that a and b represent our legs and c represents our hypotenuse to kind of set up this equation where we plug in the two leg lengths, and we are solving for that unknown side. So we'll set up an equation, we'll use our calculator to do that. And then we'll round our answers to the nearest tenth. That's 1 decimal place. Okay, so let's jump into example number 1 here. If you don't have a calculator yet, please go and grab it now. You're going to need that calculator. It's going to be able to do the squares and the square roots for you so that you don't have to do that. Okay, so this first one, we have this triangle with a leg length of 8 inches, a leg length of 7 inches, and then we don't know the other side. So what I like to do is I always like to label these. So let's just call 8 our A and 7 our B. That leaves us with the side length we don't know of C. And I always like to just add a question mark there to remind myself that's what I'm trying to find. Okay, so let's set up our equation for this. We're going to use that Pythagorean theorem, so I'm going to just rewrite it on this first one. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. So I set that up, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a, which I know to be 8, and take b, which I know to be 7, and I'm going to replace those into my equation. So 8 is going to go in there, and 7 is going to go in there. So it'll look something like this. 8 squared plus 7 squared equals c squared. Right? So then we use our calculator. So pick it up. We know that 8 squared is 8 times 8. There's actually a squared button on your calculator. I believe it's next to the 7. To the left of it, it says x squared. So if you type an 8 and then you type that squared button, it will square it for you, giving you that 8 squared is 64. Okay, then we're going to repeat the process with our 7. So 7 squared is 49, and that still equals c squared. Okay, now We add those up into our calculator, and we get this 113 equals c squared. But if you look up here, we don't want to find out what c squared is. We want to find out what c is. So in order to figure out that, we have to figure out what operation gets rid of the square. Do you remember? Just like adding is the opposite of subtracting, multiplying is the opposite of dividing. What is the opposite of squaring? Did you say the square root? If so, you would be correct. I'm just going to switch my color here so you can kind of see that this is another step here. So what I am doing is taking the square root of 113. Whatever I do on one side, I have to do to the other. So I take the square root. Now in our last unit, we had to approximate, well, that this was between the square root of 100 and the square root of 121, probably slightly closer to just past that halfway point to the larger side. But here our calculator can do the work for us. So just like squaring is the opposite of square rooting, if you locate that squared button, above it, you will see the square root. Okay, remember to get that above function, I hit the second button. So go ahead and hit second, and then hit the square root button, and then type in 113. When you do that, you would get that 10.6 equals C. And I always like to double check before I circle my answer. The hypotenuse should be the longest side. Would 10.7 be, or excuse me, 10.6 be the longest side? And the answer is yes. So I can confidently circle my answer. Okay, so that walks you through all the steps of solving one of these equations, or for that unknown side length. So let's take a look at another one with a picture here. We have 6 as one side length, 10 as another, and then a side length we don't know. Now on this one, I'm going to show you some tricks that we can do to solve this just a little bit faster. Okay, so again, doesn't matter what I pick versus A and B. Okay, and I'm going to plug it into that equation. So 6 squared plus 10 squared equals C squared. Okay, now your calculator can put this whole statement, this whole expression into your calculator. 6 squared plus 10 squared. So go ahead and do that now. Type in a 6, then hit the squared button, then hit the plus, then hit the 10, then hit the squared button, and then hit enter. So instead of having to put those in separately and then add them up, your calculator can just do all that work for you and get that you have 136 equals C squared. Then I want to undo that squaring, so I will take the square root. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. I type it in my calculator again, remember hitting the second button, hitting the square root, and then typing in 136. And you should get 11.7 equals C. Now before I circle my answer, I always like to double check, does that make sense? Would 11.7 inches as my C side length make sense? And it would. It would be the longest side because it's longer than 10. So I will go ahead and circle 11.7 as my answer. Now this third type, it's very similar, but there's no picture to go with it. Now you can draw a picture if that helps you to visualize that, or you can just use the information that's there. Okay, so it says that 2 legs of a right triangle have lengths of 14 and 17. what is the length of the diagonal? Okay, so I've got these. Wow, that's a not great triangle. Let's try again. You can tell I don't have my tablet because I can't make a perfect one like I could before. So there we go, and we've got a right triangle. One of the side lengths, it tells us a leg is 14 and the other leg is 17. And what is the length of the diagonal? That diagonal side would be C. Doesn't matter what I label these, so I'll just label A and B. So I would put 14 squared plus 17 squared, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Now in my calculator, I'm going to type 14 squared plus 17 squared, and I would get 485 equals C squared. Now how do I undo something that's squared? I take the square root, and the square root of 485, it's like 22.01 or 02, I think it is. So we can just say 22, or you could put 22.0 if you really wanted to. Either are acceptable. And I would always check, does 22 make sense here? And the answer is yes, it would be the longest side. So that is it for our notes for today. We will jump into these other notes in the future here, but we're going to kind of slowly introduce these different skills. But this is your skill for today. We're going to do some whiteboard practice. I've got 6 questions for you to practice. Remember to show your work on those because that's how you will earn your evidence. I hope to see you soon. I hope you're having a great day, and I will talk to you later. Bye, 8th graders.